Anchor here, and while official goodbyes will follow a bit later on, and while the broadcast will continue starting Monday, preparing for this departure had a lot of us looking back at all that happened here on our watch. The events we chronicled each evening going back through the last about 2,000 weeknights or so. It amounts to a time capsule of U.S. and world history. We now know that a TWA jet aircraft, Flight 800, en route tonight from JFK Airport in New York to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, France, has exploded in midair, apparently landing in the Atlantic. Good evening. It was just about the worst fear among the Olympic planners, anyone in law enforcement really, that something would happen during the games. Well, it happened this morning. This is what it looked like in Atlanta's Centennial Park when the bomb went off early in the morning. We've been following the car accident this evening in Paris, France. Several sources have made independent announcements that indeed Princess Diana has died tonight. The accusation, and so far that's all it is, an accusation, is that the president had a relationship of some sort with a young woman who was an intern in the White House. Associated Press, after 2 days of searching and insisting there was still hope. Authorities are now conceding it is likely that John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife, and her sister are dead.
I just started screaming and crying and telling them not to shoot me.
As one writer put it this afternoon, the young gunman moved calmly through the school library, giggling as they shot point blank at students cowering under their desks. There has been a horrible shooting in the high school called Columbine.
NBC News presents The Millennium.
It is with great joy that we come on the air here at 11:21 in the evening, able to report a glitch-free, safe, and largely wonderful New Year's Eve. This moment is for everyone who committed to memory the age they'd be at the moment when this happened.
This is Decision 2000 election coverage.
The state of Florida will go tonight to the vice president, Mr. Gore. NBC News is changing its projection of the state of Florida, effective immediately from Al Gore to officially too close to call. George W. Bush, the governor of Texas, is projected now to win the presidency of the United States. NBC News, as of right now, is calling Florida officially too close to call.
The World Trade Center is no more.
It is the worst attack on America in American history. It was as grim, as grisly a scene as anyone can remember in the continental United States, and the death toll is being predicted to be perhaps in the thousands. Good evening from NBC News headquarters in New York. Our coverage, day-long coverage of the space shuttle mid-air disaster over Texas continues. Tonight, the U.S.-led war against Iraq is underway, and Saddam Hussein's whereabouts are still unknown. How would you describe the quality of the Iraqi soldiers you've encountered?
Guys in pickup trucks with mounted machine guns and RPGs.
The regulars on this line are used to looking out for each other, but mostly for suicide bombers. Anything that doesn't look quite right. Good evening to you from Virginia Beach tonight. I can just hear the folks at home saying, you know, they got what they deserve. Oh, the places you'll go. Just some of the big stories we have covered these last 7 years, and I wish all of them had been happier. We want to turn now to someone we have called upon regularly here on CNBC after 7.5 years. While it may not seem that long, when we went to find the tape of our very first broadcast, we found it was recorded on a format we no longer use. Well, not quite Betamax, you get the point. It has been a long time, and a lot has happened. I was covering President Clinton for NBC News when the phone in our West Wing booth rang one afternoon. It was the president of NBC News calling with an idea and letting me in on a top-secret plan to launch a new network. It would be called MSNBC. And he went on, would I like to be the anchor and managing editor of an hour-long evening newscast that would serve as the flagship, as he put it, of this new fledgling operation? The year was 1996, and my answer, of course, was yes. That was 1,935 newscasts ago, not counting the countless live hours of special reports. We aired back then at 9 p.m. on Msnbc and 10 p.m. on CNBC. The latter is the only time slot that has not changed in close to 8 years. We used to joke in the early days we'd get a larger audience by walking through the Paramus Mall shouting the news than by broadcasting to the hardy few who were able to even find MSNBC on their remotes on cable back then. I will now go back to the mothership, back to what I started doing at NBC News over a decade ago, reporting for NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw until the day later this year when Tom departs from Nightly News and I get to pull up a chair. At this point, it becomes all about thanks and gratitude. To our loyal viewers, thank you for joining us for an hour each night. Thanks for stopping me in airports and saying so. The only real tragedy is you will never get to know the people who put this broadcast on the air. They are family to me, and it seems as if I owe half of them either wedding gifts or baby gifts by now. They are the best people I have ever worked with. Our success is thanks only to them, their dedication, the countless hours they have worked. The good news, they'll be here Monday night. The news is going to be in the best possible hands as my friend John Siegenthaler takes over the reins. I cannot think of a more experienced, a steadier, or more capable journalist to take over this newscast. To those of you who have tuned in every night, it has been an honor chatting with you. I'm only sorry that so much of what we've had to report has been so sad and so tragic over the years, a lot like our world lately. We'll continue to cover it. I'll be just down the dial, as we used to say. John will be here with all the people I love, and part of me will always be here as well. And so, one last thank you, and one last good night.
This is an NBC News special.
The President's State of the Union Address, live from Washington. George W. Bush delivers his annual report on America to Congress and the country. Tonight, you will hear the President's speech and the Democratic leadership's response. Also, we'll take an in-depth look at the candidate push and the field of Democratic contenders as we look ahead to the issues and the personalities of Decision 2004.
From Washington, D.C., the State of the Union Address. Here now, Tom Brokaw.
Good evening from the nation's capital. President George W. Bush speaks to Congress tonight and the nation on the State of the Union, a report required by the Constitution under Article 2 for a sitting president who wants to be reelected. This is a matchless opportunity to get his campaign started on his terms with a national television audience across the networks. And this is the scene tonight in the House chamber where security is exceptionally tight.
Mr. Speaker, the President's cabinet.
Members of the cabinet coming in now. There will be one missing member. The reason they're
Watch out, Bob.
This has been a presentation of NBC News. More Americans watch NBC News than any other news organization in the world.
Wanted, terrorists in Iraq recruiting volunteers in Europe for suicide bombing missions. Missile defense. A new study says protecting commercial jetliners against terrorist missile attacks would carry a sky-high price tag. But how much is too much when it comes to safety? And Hometown Boy, remembering Johnny Carson. In a Nebraska town, they remember the boy they gave to the nation and what he gave back to them.
from NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. Just 5 days to go until the Iraqi elections. The U.S. and other coalition nations are trying hard to send out the signal to candidates to run and to voters to vote without fear where they can. The problem is the message the insurgents are sending out as well. Vote and you'll be killed. As more were today in another run of violence while much of the world is watching. We begin our reporting tonight with NBC's Richard Engel in Baghdad. Some Myers about what all this might say about al-Qaeda and a European connection. Today, Senate Democrats took to the floor to complain about Secretary of State nominee Condoleezza Rice, saying she misled Americans about the Iraq War and served as an apologist for the Bush administration failures in Iraq. Republicans defended her and said the Democrats were just trying to settle partisan scores. Here is NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell.
Democrats have never doubted that
Dr. Rice took what was a possibility.
Significant quantities of uranium.
This war was sold to us.
There are a number of staggering figures being thrown around in Washington these days. The cost of the war, the growing deficit. NBC's David Gregory joins us tonight from the White House with the view from there on managing it all. David, good evening.
Good evening.
In Phoenix, Arizona tonight, residents there are stocking up on bottled water after problems at a water treatment plant continue this Tuesday night. NBC News In Depth. Our special series here, Coming Home. Veterans back from Iraq dealing with emotional wounds. And later, remembering the Johnny they knew. The residents of Johnny Carson's hometown talk about their famous favorite son.
She turned around.
Tonight we continue our series here called Coming Home. Did you know, for example, that some returning Iraq veterans are told they will instinctively reach for their weapons for up to 6 months or more once they're home? Others are told to avoid shopping malls, crowds, or loud noises. Children are warned not to startle their sleeping fathers who are just home from the war. It is all just part of the mental recovery from this kind of combat. Tonight, as our series continues, NBC's Mike Taibbi on what's being done to lessen the effects of what they've all seen and done. Federal and nonprofit agencies committed to helping homeless veterans. It's come back missiles as weapons of terror and the high price of keeping them away from American jetliners.